The great hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with worried voices as alien representatives from dozens of worlds gathered around the massive holographic display. Red warning lights blinked across star systems, showing the terrible advance of the Vexti Dominion's war fleets. Admiral Kulthek stood at the center podium, his blue skin pale with exhaustion. His species had been fighting the Dominion for 6 months straight, losing ground every single day. "Honored council members," he began, his voice echoing through the crystal chamber. "The situation grows worse by the hour. The Dominion has taken 14 star systems in the past month alone." Murmurs of fear rippled through the gathered aliens. Some had tentacles that writhed nervously, others had feathers that stood on end, and a few species simply trembled where they sat. Ambassador Li Dongsu from Earth watched quietly from the human section. The middle-aged diplomat wore a simple dark suit and kept his hands folded calmly on the table before him. Next to him, Colonel Park Min-ah studied the tactical reports on her tablet, her young face growing more serious with each page she read. "We have lost over 3 billion lives," Admiral Kulthek continued. "Our combined fleets cannot match their firepower. The Dominion destroys everything in their path. They take no prisoners and show no mercy." An elderly creature covered in silver scales raised one of his many arms. "What options remain to us, Admiral?" "Very few, Speaker Velnath. Our military experts believe we need at least twice as many ships to have any chance of stopping them." From across the chamber, a clear voice spoke up. "Earth would like to offer our assistance." All eyes turned to Ambassador Li Dongsu as he stood slowly. The human looked small compared to most of the alien representatives, but his voice carried confidence. "The United Earth Government formally requests permission to deploy our military forces to help defend Council territory," he said. "We have been part of this Council family for 30 years. We cannot stand by and watch our neighbors suffer." The chamber fell completely silent. Many aliens exchanged nervous glances. A few whispered to each other in their native languages. Then, from the very back of the great hall came the sound of a walking stick tapping against the crystal floor. The crowd parted as Elder Thokran made his way forward. The ancient being was older than most civilizations, his wrinkled gray skin telling the story of countless centuries. His species had seen the rise and fall of 3 different galactic governments. "No," the elder said simply, his voice like grinding stone. Ambassador Li Dongsu turned to face him. "Elder Thokran, with all respect, humanity has lived in peace with the Council for 3 decades. We have helped with trade disputes, shared our technology, and followed all galactic laws. Now our friends are dying, and you ask us to do nothing?" The elder's ancient eyes studied the human ambassador for a long moment. "Young human, I have lived for 800 years. I have seen species like yours before." "What do you mean by that, sir?" Elder Thokran's walking stick tapped the floor again. "Warriors who believe they fight for justice. Species who think their cause makes them righteous." His voice grew quieter, forcing everyone to lean forward to hear. "The last time we allowed such a species to join a galactic war, there was no galaxy left to govern when they finished." Colonel Park Min-ah stood up beside her ambassador. "Elder, are you comparing us to the Dominion? They are the ones committing genocide across the stars." "No, child. I am not comparing you to the Dominion." The elder turned to address the entire council. "The Dominion kills and conquers, yes. They are cruel and without mercy. But they follow certain rules. They have limits. They want something from their victims. Slaves, resources, territory." He pointed one gnarled finger at the human delegation. "Your species is different. I have studied your history very carefully. Humans do not fight to gain something. They fight to end the problem completely." Ambassador Li Dongsu kept his face calm. "We have lived in peace for 30 years, Elder." "Yes, because you have had no reason for war, but I can see it in your eyes, human, the hunger. Your species does not stop fighting until the enemy can never fight again." Elder Thokran looked around at all the worried alien faces. "The Dominion can be reasoned with, they can be bribed or contained. Treaties can be made with them." He paused, letting his words sink in. But if you release humanity into this war, it will end, yes, but not with victory. It will end in silence. Complete silence. The vote was called 30 minutes later. Despite humanity's polite offers and promises of restraint, the Galactic Council voted to continue the war without Earth's involvement. The decision was close, only passing by 7 votes. As the session ended and aliens began filing out of the Great Hall, Ambassador Lee Dong-Su approached Elder Thokran. "You really believe we are that dangerous, Elder?" The ancient being looked at him with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. "Ambassador, in my language we have a word that does not exist in yours. It means the peace that comes after everything stops making noise. I believe your species is the living meaning of that word." The human ambassador nodded politely and walked away, his face showing no emotion at all. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council refused Earth's help, and the war was going badly for everyone except the Dominion. General Kim Tae-ho stood in the underground command center beneath Seoul, watching the large screens that showed space battles happening light years away. The images were not good. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Shin Da-hai from her workstation, "we're getting another emergency call from the Centauri colonies. The Dominion fleet will reach them in less than 20 hours. The general's jaw tightened as he watched the tactical display. Bright red dots showed Dominion ships moving closer to yet another defenseless world. Blue dots, representing Council. Forces were scattered and retreating everywhere. President Han Min-seo joined the meeting through a secure video link from the Blue House. The president looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. "The Council still says no to our help?" "They're being slaughtered out there," General Kim replied bluntly. "Billions are dead and they want us to sit here and watch it happen." Dr. Yoon Jae-min, Earth's expert on alien cultures, cleared his throat nervously. "Perhaps the Council has reasons we don't understand. Some alien species have strange beliefs about warfare that we might not—" "Doctor," interrupted Admiral Choi Hee-jin, speaking from Luna Command Station orbiting the moon, "I've been listening to Dominion radio messages. They're not just conquering planets anymore. They're killing everyone they find. This isn't war. It's the complete destruction of entire races." The room went quiet as new information came in through the communication systems. The Vegan Star system, home to over 4 billion fish-like creatures, had stopped sending any signals at all. Complete radio silence. "That's enough," President Han said firmly. "We're not asking for permission anymore. General Kim, start Operation Righteous Path immediately." "Sir," Dr. Yoon protested, "this could ruin our friendship with the Council. Forever." "Then they should have thought about that before asking us to watch genocide happen," President Han replied, his voice cold and final. High above Earth in the darkness of space, something amazing began to happen. Massive shipyards that everyone thought had been shut down years ago suddenly blazed with bright lights and activity. The human space fleet, which the Council believed was only 200 ships, began to show its true size. One by one, over 2,000 warships powered up their engines and dropped their invisibility shields. They had been hiding in space around Earth for decades, waiting for this moment. Captain Bae Soo-jin stood on the bridge of the huge battleship Seoul's Vengeance, watching as ship after ship appeared on her screens. The fleet was enormous, far bigger than anyone outside Earth had imagined. "All ships, this is Fleet Command," came the voice over the radio. "Operation Righteous Path is now active. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting for everyone the Dominion has murdered." As the human armada prepared to jump into hyperspace, a desperate message came through from Elder Thokran on the Council's home world. "Humans, please. Think about what you're doing. You don't understand what you're about to release into the galaxy." General Kim's response was broadcast on all frequencies so everyone could hear. "Elder, with respect, you don't understand what you've already released by doing nothing. The Dominion thinks they're the strongest predators in space. They're about to learn they're wrong." The human fleet vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind only empty space and the echo of Elder Thokran's final transmission. "May the galaxy forgive us all for what we have done. On Earth, The mood was different from the sadness and fear on other worlds. In military bases around the planet, soldiers and officers watched the news coverage with grim satisfaction. They had trained for this day for 30 years, studying every alien species, learning their weaknesses, preparing for a war they hoped would never come. Colonel Park Ji-hoon, getting ready to deploy with the second wave of ships, spoke to his soldiers. "The council called us dangerous. They said we don't know when to stop fighting. Maybe they're right. But the Dominion is about to find out what happens when you threaten our neighbors." In space, the human fleet moved faster than anyone thought possible. They had been secretly building jump gates and supply stations throughout Council space for years, always claiming they were for peaceful trade and exploration. Now those hidden bases would let human forces appear anywhere in the galaxy within hours. Admiral Park Kyung-ho, commanding the Third Fleet from his flagship Busan's Pride, sent a message to all human forces. "The enemy has shown no mercy to civilians, no respect for surrender, and no limits to their cruelty. We will show them what war really looks like when fought by a species that learns from its enemies." Back on the Council homeworld, Elder Thokran sat alone in his chambers, staring out at the stars. He had tried to warn them. He had seen this before, species that fought not just to win, but to make sure the fighting could never happen again. The old alien picked up his communication device and sent one final message to the few council members who might listen. "The humans are coming. The Dominion will fall, but I fear we have not saved the galaxy. We have simply chosen our new masters." In the darkness of space, 2,000 human warships raced toward their first battle, carrying weapons and tactics that would change galactic warfare forever. The Kepler 442 star system burned with weapons fire as the Dominion's massive war fleet attacked the last Council stronghold. War leader Grexval stood on the bridge of his enormous flagship, watching his ships destroy the orbital defense stations, one by one. "How many enemy ships remain?" he asked his second-in-command. "Only 37 Council vessels, War Leader," replied Sub-Commander Hyktar. "They cannot last more than 4 hours. Victory is certain." Grexval smiled, showing his sharp teeth. His species had conquered 43 star systems in the past year. No one could stop the Dominion war machine. Suddenly, alarms began screaming throughout the Dominion fleet. Space itself seemed to tear open as 60 human warships appeared out of nowhere in perfect formation. Captain Lee Sun-ho stood on the bridge of the destroyer Busan Rising, looking at the massive enemy ships through his tactical viewer. The Dominion vessels were huge. Some were 10 times bigger than his ship. But size was not everything in war. "All ships. This is Sword Leader," he spoke into his radio. "Remember what they did to the Vegan colonies. No mercy. No survivors." War Leader. Grexval studied the new arrivals with confusion. The human ships were much smaller than his mighty dreadnoughts, and their weapon signatures looked weak. What foolish species dares to challenge the Dominion with such tiny ships? His answer came in the form of nuclear fire. The human fleet attacked, with a violence that made no sense to military experts. Instead of staying back and shooting from a safe distance like normal space fleets, they charged straight at the Dominion ships. Human vessels barely 1/10 the size of enemy battleships rammed directly into their hulls. Commander Park Ji-hoon piloted his small fighter Soul Fury straight toward the bridge of a Dominion cruiser. His radio crackled with his final words. "This is for the children who died on Vega." The explosion when his ship hit took out 3 Dominion vessels at once. "What madness is this?" War leader Grexval shouted as human ships swarmed his fleet like angry wasps. "They're killing themselves." But Sub-Commander Hyktar had been studying the human attack patterns. "War leader, they're not committing suicide. They're trading one of their ships for 3 of ours. At this rate, we will lose." The terrible mathematics became clear. The humans were winning through pure, calculated brutality. Captain Choi Minna commanded the cruiser Incheon's Wrath, and she opened fire with weapons that broke several galactic war treaties. Her cluster bombs were designed to kill as many enemy crew members as possible. Her electromagnetic weapons left enemy crews awake and screaming while their ships died around them. Worst of all were her quantum weapons that made it impossible for anyone to survive or be rescued. The Dominion had always thought they were the most brutal warriors in the galaxy. They were wrong. Within 2 hours, the invincible Dominion 12th Fleet was nothing but floating wreckage. Of the human attack force, only 12 ships were still working, but they had achieved total victory. War leader Grexvol lay dying in his broken command center, bleeding from multiple wounds. With his last breath, he managed to send a warning message to Dominion High Command. Do not fight the humans in direct battle. They do not fight like civilized beings. They fight like us, but much, much worse. The transmission ended in static. In the Council command bunker on the planet below, the surviving alien defenders watched in shocked silence as the human fleet regrouped. Admiral Velcast, a veteran officer who had fought in dozens of space battles, opened a communication channel to Captain Lee Sun-ho. "Human Commander," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "We thank you for saving us." Captain Lee's response sent chills down the alien's spine. "Don't thank us yet, Admiral. We're just getting started." The human captain's face on the screen showed no emotion, no joy at victory, no sadness for his lost crews, just cold determination. "We monitored Dominion communications during the battle," Captain Lee continued. "They have 60 more fleets scattered across the galaxy. We're going to find every single one of them." Admiral Velcast had fought the Dominion for months. He knew they were cruel and merciless. But looking at the human captain's emotionless face, he realized something terrifying. The humans were going to be worse. "Captain," the alien admiral asked carefully, "what about prisoners? Surely some of the enemy crews survived." "There are no prisoners in this war, Admiral," Captain Lee replied simply. "The Dominion chose to make this about extermination when they destroyed Vega. We're just better at extermination than they are." The communication ended, leaving Admiral Velcast staring at a blank screen. Around him, his alien officers whispered nervously to each other. They had begged for human help for months. Now they wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. In space, the 12 surviving human ships began collecting data from the wreckage. They studied Dominion technology, communication codes, and navigation records. Every piece of information would help them hunt down the remaining enemy fleets. Captain Lee Sun-ho made one final transmission to Earth Command. "First engagement successful. Enemy tactics are inferior to our projections. Beginning systematic. Elimination of all Dominion forces. Estimate complete victory in 6 months." 2 weeks after the first battle, the entire galaxy had changed. The Dominion, which had been winning everywhere, now found themselves running away from 3 different areas as human fleets appeared like ghosts in the night. Supreme War Leader Krexthol stood in the command center of the Dominion's greatest warship, reading reports that made no sense. His species had ruled space for over a century, but now they were losing battle after battle. "How are they moving so fast?" he demanded from his intelligence officer. "Our spies told us humans only had 200 ships." Intelligence Master Zixfel's multiple eyes showed extreme stress. "Supreme Leader, our count was very wrong. The humans have been lying to us for 30 years. They now have over 3,000 active warships." "Impossible. Where did they hide so many ships?" "They built secret shipyards throughout Council space." "Supreme Leader, they told everyone the facilities were for trade and exploration, but they were really building the largest war fleet in galactic history." The truth was worse than simple deception. Humanity had spent 3 decades studying every alien species, learning their weaknesses and preparing for a war they hoped would never come. But when it did come, they were ready. General Song Min-jae commanded human forces in the Rigel sector from his massive battleship, Taijongdae. Unlike other species who used the same tactics against everyone, humans had created different fighting styles for each enemy type. Against Dominion ships with energy shields, they used physical weapons that smashed right through. Against heavily armored vessels, they used focused energy beams. And against the enemy crews themselves, they used something much worse. "Deploy the fear weapons," General Song ordered coldly. The human arsenal included devices designed not just to destroy enemy ships but to make the crews suffer terrible psychological damage before they died. Sound weapons that drove enemy soldiers insane, neural disruptors that left them awake but unable to move as their ships burned, and time distortion fields that made the crew experience their deaths in slow motion while broadcasting their screams across all radio frequencies. Colonel An Su-young served as the psychological warfare specialist, monitoring the effects of these horrible weapons. General, Dominion morale is collapsing everywhere. Entire fleets are surrendering without even trying to fight. But General Song's orders were clear and simple. No prisoners. The Dominion chose to commit genocide. Now they get genocide in return. The galaxy watched in horror as human forces showed they had learned all the wrong lessons from the Dominion's cruelty. Where the Dominion had conquered planets and enslaved populations, humans simply destroyed everything. Where the Dominion had shown mercy to some civilians, humans showed mercy to no one. On the Council homeworld, Elder Thokran met secretly with emergency speaker Kelvar in the deepest underground bunkers, far from human listening devices. "It's happening exactly as I feared," Thokran whispered. "They're not freeing conquered worlds, they're making them uninhabitable. But surely they'll stop once the Dominion surrenders completely." Thokran's ancient eyes held no hope. "Speaker, I've studied their military thinking. Humans don't fight wars to win territory or resources. They fight to solve problems permanently. And their solution to the Dominion problem is complete elimination. The reports from the war zones spoke for themselves. The Altair system. All Dominion. Forces destroyed. No survivors found. The Proxima colonies. Orbital bombing continued for 6 hours after the last enemy ship was eliminated. The Kepler mining stations. Fusion bombs used against civilian targets to make sure no one could ever use them again. Admiral Park Kyung-ho commanded the human 7th Fleet and sent a message that would be remembered throughout galactic history. To all Dominion forces, surrender is no longer possible. You chose to make this war about extinction. We're simply better at extinction than you are. The Dominion's desperate attempts to fight back only made things worse. Every cruel act they committed was repaid 10 times over by human forces that seemed to have forgotten all ideas about fighting fairly or showing mercy. Captain Kim Yoo-jin, commanding a human destroyer, received a surrender offer from a damaged Dominion cruiser. The enemy ship had lost its weapons and was full of wounded crew members begging for medical help. "Surrender accepted," Captain Kim replied calmly. Then she ordered her weapons officer, "Fire all missiles, no survivors." When her bridge crew looked shocked, she explained, "They didn't accept surrender from the civilians on Vega. We don't accept surrender from them." The psychological effect on both sides was devastating. Dominion forces began abandoning their posts rather than face human fleets. But even worse, Council species started to fear their human allies almost as much as they had feared the Dominion. Ambassador Nextall of the Spiral Confederation sent a secret message to other Council members. "The humans are not liberating us. They're replacing one terrible enemy with something worse." But it was too late to stop what they had started. Human fleets moved through space like a plague, methodically hunting down every Dominion ship, base, and colony. They used weapons that most species considered too horrible for war, tactics that violated every galactic treaty, and showed a level of organized cruelty that impressed even their enemies. In just 2 weeks, the species that had lived peacefully for 30 years had become the most feared military force in galactic history. The war was far from over, but everyone already knew how it would end. The only question was whether anyone would be left alive to remember it. The formal surrender ceremony took place in the ruins of the Dominion capital world. The once mighty planet was now a burning wasteland, its great cities reduced to smoking craters. Supreme War Leader Krexthul, the last surviving member of the Dominion High Command, knelt on the metal floor of the human flagship New Sol. Admiral Kim Yoo-jin stood before him, her face showing no emotion as she looked down at the defeated alien warrior. Behind her, human officers watched silently, their hands resting on their weapons. "We surrender completely," Krexthul gasped, his proud warrior species reduced to begging. Please the remaining civilians on our worlds. They had nothing to do with the war. Admiral Kim's voice was calm and cold. There are no civilians in a total war, Supreme Leader. You taught us that lesson when you destroyed every living thing on Vega. The Dominion fleet, which had once numbered tens of thousands of vessels, was now reduced to fewer than 100 ships. Most were badly damaged and filled with traumatized survivors who could barely function. Meanwhile, the human fleet had grown during the war, and now included over 5,000 ships of increasing power and sophistication. President Han Min-seo addressed the galaxy from Earth in a speech broadcast to every inhabited world. The Dominion threat has been eliminated forever. Peace has been restored to the galaxy. But on the Council homeworld, the alien representatives knew the truth was more complicated. Ambassador Lee Dong-soo, the same polite diplomat who had once asked for permission to help, now sat at the head of the council chamber. The human delegation had grown to 3 times its original size and had moved to the seats traditionally held by the founding species. The war is over, Lee Dong-soo announced with the same calm voice he had always used. Now we must make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Elder Thokran, one of the few aliens brave enough to speak up, asked the question everyone was thinking. And how exactly do you plan to do that, Ambassador? Simple, Elder. The galaxy needs proper management. The word management sounded innocent, but its meaning was terrifying. Human management meant human oversight of all military forces, human approval for all travel between star systems, human monitoring of all communications, and human administrators placed in every major system. Colonel Yu Yun-hai, now bearing the new title of Sector Governance Coordinator, explained the new reality to a gathering of species representatives. For galactic security, all member species will reduce their military forces to basic peacekeeping levels only. Defense against external threats will be handled exclusively by human forces. Ambassador Nextall of the Spiral Confederation raised one of his tentacles nervously. And what if we refuse these new arrangements? Colonel Yu's smile was perfectly pleasant and absolutely frightening. Why would anyone refuse a system that guarantees permanent peace? The threat was crystal clear. Humanity had demonstrated what happened to those who chose war over their version of peace. The Dominion's homeworld was still burning as a reminder. Within 6 months, the transformation was complete. Human governors administered every major world, human fleets patrolled every trade route, and human monitors observed every communication between star systems. The species that had desperately begged for Earth's help now lived under the gentle but absolute rule of their saviors. The changes came gradually, making them seem reasonable. First, all weapons manufacturing was centralized under human control for efficiency. Then all interstellar travel required human permits for safety. Finally, all communication networks were routed through human stations for security. Captain I. Bei Su-jin, now promoted to planetary administrator of the former council capital, met with local alien officials every week. The meetings were always polite and friendly. We're not conquerors, she would always explain with a warm smile. We're protectors. Everything we do is to keep you safe. The alien officials would nod and agree, knowing that disagreement meant their worlds might suffer the same fate as the Dominion planets. Elder Thokran, in his final journal entry before his mysterious disappearance, wrote words that would be secretly passed between resistance groups for generations. I warned them. I told the council what would happen if they allowed humanity to join the war. The Dominion is gone, yes. The war is over, yes. But we have not won. We have simply traded a crude master for an efficient one. His final words were prophetic. The humans were right about one thing. They did end the war permanently. They ended the possibility of any war ever again by making sure no one else has the power to fight one. Some species tried to resist the new order in small ways. They would hold secret meetings, pass hidden messages, or quietly refuse to follow certain human directives. But these small rebellions never lasted long. Human intelligence networks were everywhere, and their response to resistance was swift and final. Entire populations would simply vanish overnight, relocated to safer worlds where they could be better protected. The galaxy was at peace. Trade flowed smoothly between worlds. There were no more wars, no more conflicts, no more suffering from violence. Children grew up never knowing the fear of invasion or conquest. But in the deep space between stars, old monitoring stations still picked up faint radio signals, the last automated distress calls from long-dead Dominion worlds, broadcasting into the void forever. The silence that answered them was the sound of perfect order, and in that perfect silence, humanity's gentle rule continued, efficient and absolute, ensuring that peace would last forever. The war was over. Everyone had gotten exactly what they asked for.